Well, hey guys, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Jessica Likewise, and I am a therapist with Path to Potentials. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how to talk to siblings about autism. This is such an important topic for so many families. Almost every day, parents are asking me, should I tell, my son, daughter that their sibling, their brother, sister has autism? If so, should I go about it? Is it better to hide it? Well, today we're going to talk about all these things and get your questions answered. So before we start, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Jessica Likewise. I've been an ABA therapist for 13 years, have a master's degree in special education. I am a speaker and author in the world of autism. I've been written up in Forbes and the New York Times, have a #1 best-selling book about autism called This is Autism. And I'm also working with Path to Potentials to really help educate families about ABA, about autism, and how to best help their children. So I'm so excited to bring you this presentation today. Right, so the first thing we want to talk about is, when you have a child that's diagnosed with autism, oftentimes the role of a sibling is different than it would be if two children were typically developing. And oftentimes parents expect a child or sibling to carry out a role, and in order to be someone for their brother or sister with autism that they may not be able to be. It's just expected that when you go somewhere that it's understood that your brother or sister may be struggling if they're autistic. And here's what parents, I want you to remember going into this presentation. Siblings are just kids too. So if you have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old with, and one is autistic and one is not, remember they're both just children. And oftentimes when you have a brother or sister that is diagnosed with autism, you're expected to carry out a role and accommodate your sibling in a way that typical kids don't necessarily have to. So I really want you to remember that going into this presentation. So here's the thing. Siblings can be a huge resource for their brothers or sisters, and it can be a huge resource for you as a parent, but it also comes with a burden that they must carry. The #1 thing that parents talk about is this fear, and I can't even imagine how difficult it is about, what's going to happen to my child when I'm not here. And that's why we push so hard, and you're fighting for your child so hard, and you're bringing them to therapists, and you're making sacrifices every day because their independence is so important. You want them to be happy and healthy and independent, and that can happen. But a lot of times, often in the back of your mind is, well, their brother or sister will be there to take care of them. And sometimes that's not only in the future, but that's also in the moment. Right? So you might drop your child off at summer camp and just expect their brother or sister to help them, to sit with them at lunch and sacrifice that time that they would have with their friends. You might expect them to understand that, if let's say your son Charles is autistic, and your daughter Susan would just understand that Charles always needs to pick the Netflix movie, even if it's the same one every day, because you want to avoid a meltdown. Or you might just expect that Susan understands, who wants to go out to eat to dinner, that you have to do takeout because Charles can't necessarily go to a restaurant and be okay or not have a meltdown. And for you as a parent, this can be helpful, right? A lot of times when a child is diagnosed with autism, I've seen parents have another child in order to make sure they have someone to play with their child, to teach their child, to help them, and maybe to babysit. And yes, that can be a huge resource, but it also is a burden for your child. So we're going to talk about how today to make sure that you can use your child as a resource, but also that it is as least overwhelming for them as possible. So here's the thing. It is just as important that siblings learn about autism as it is for parents. And I am a huge believer in making sure that a sibling knows that their brother or sister is autistic, and not only knows that there is a diagnosis, but understands what that means and what struggles that their brother or sister may have. Like I said, you may take for granted that the sibling will understand that there are certain struggles, that there's certain places you may not be able to go, certain things you have to do. And yet they're just kids. They may not fully understand that, and they may start to resent it if they don't fully understand it. Now, not only that, but sometimes your brother or sisters, they may not be able to interact and play the same way, and it can be hard. And oftentimes, I ask a parent, does this person's sister know and understand that he has autism? Does he understand and know what that means? And she'll say, yeah, well, she knows that something's different. And it's like, okay, yes, she does, but did you take time to sit down and say, this is what it means that your brother's autistic? These are the things that he's really, really good at. And these are the things he really struggles with. This is how you can play with him. This is how you can support him. This is what I need from you. For kids, that can be so just relieving to understand what's happening. Because like I said, kids know intuitively something's different. They know that something different is expected from them, but if they don't really understand it, they'll begin to resent it, and they'll have a much bigger struggle with it. So, by a lot of times parents will say, well, I don't really want to put that burden on my child to understand what autism is. I don't want to tell them. And, as a parent, when you get a diagnosis of autism, it is so challenging. And there's a grieving process that comes with it, because your child is beautiful and special and wonderful and amazing. And I'm not in any way discounting who the beautiful person your child is, but you also lost the child you thought you would have and the experiences that you thought you may have with your child. And oftentimes that pain that you experience when you got a diagnosis, you want to save your son or daughter from going through that same experience when they find out their brother or sister's autistic. But here's the problem. They know already, they just don't understand. And by not telling them, you're denying them the ability to understand what's happening. And oftentimes, understanding makes things easier. If you understand why there's a struggle, it's easier to be able to emotionally deal with it and also understand how to help and how to support. So I'm a big believer that as soon as your child is mature enough to understand, and that's going to be different for some kids. For some kids, it's 10. For some kids, it's 5. It just depends upon your child. I think it's a great idea to sit down, have a conversation, and help them understand. Okay, another thing that's really important that we talked about is that oftentimes, if you have a child with autism, there's certain things that may or may not be hard for your family. Some things like going to see a movie, some things like going out to eat. And oftentimes we talked about a sibling is expected to understand and make sacrifices. And that happens naturally. One of the best ways to alleviate the frustration they may feel, and also to really help them with, just to give them what they need, is to schedule time alone for special events with siblings. The reality of it is that being a child or having a brother or sister that's autistic, it can be challenging. Some resentment is inevitable because there's going to be some things that they don't get to do. But if you schedule time alone with them, it's going to be so critical and it's so important, and when you do that, make sure they're able to do the things that your family may not otherwise be able to do. That weekly, whether it's weekly or monthly, that just date time with mom or dad, that's something that is so important and so special to them. And when they're on that special time, not only are they going to get to do things that they want to do, but they're also going to get a time to talk to you and be open about their feelings, which is really the next thing that I wanted to talk about with you. It's important that your children feel that they can come to you and that they have a safe place where they can express their feelings. And if they're upset, that they can talk to you about it. And, having that date time alone with them, one-on-one with you, is so, so important to make sure that they're getting fed. If you're getting fed, if the children are getting fed their special time, then when they're making those sacrifices, it's not going to be as challenging. The other thing is that I am a big advocate in getting autism siblings around other autism siblings. And the reason being is because, being a sibling of a child with autism, it's different. And there's certain sacrifices that their kids are making. And oftentimes it can be very isolating. It feels like they're the only ones making that sacrifice. So when they make friends with people or with other kids that are going through a similar situation and are making similar sacrifices, there's a bonding and understanding that can take place that can make it so much easier when they realize that it's not just them. It's not totally abnormal, that this is something other people go through as well. It can make things a lot easier for them. And this is something that is really important. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes siblings can bear the brunt of challenging behaviors that your son or daughter with autism may have. Now, not all kids that are autistic do have severe challenging behaviors, but sometimes we see that siblings bear the brunt of aggressive behaviors, of tantrums, and like I said, the kids have to be taught how to actually deal with that in the moment, right? So you don't want your kids fighting each other. If your autistic son is having a meltdown and maybe throwing things at his sister, you have to teach her how to deal with that and help manage the behavior. So it's not going to be a typical sibling fight, right? So that's a really important thing to talk about. You know, oftentimes when kids are autistic, they'll get frustrated, they'll start pulling hair, they'll slap, they'll pinch, and it's hard. I mean, and as a parent, you don't want your child to get hurt, and you certainly don't want your child to have to deal with that. So teaching them how to navigate those behaviors is really, really critical. And again, this goes back to the more they understand about autism, the more they understand about their brother or sister's behavior, the easier it is going to be for them. And then, like I said, communication is key. And this is what I was touching upon on those special date nights. When you're with your child alone, make sure your child feels like they can speak to you. You know, if your child comes to you and says, I'm frustrated because I really wanted to go to the movies tonight and we can't, and all my friends saw this movie, don't just say, well, you know that your brother can't do that, or, I have a lot on my plate, and I know it's frustrating and it's hard as a parent, but make sure you listen to what your kids have to say. Oftentimes when they're communicating frustration to you, they're not necessarily looking for you to fix the situation. They're just looking for you to understand what they're going through. So make sure your child always has an open line of communication. That'll be really helpful in helping make sure that their relationship is successful and that they have a healthy and happy childhood as well. So we talked a lot about in this presentation some of the challenges that come with being an autism sibling. But having a brother or sister with autism, it also has a lot of benefits as well. And I wanted to touch upon that. And really, before we just end and make it seem like it's only challenging, there's some really good things that come about from having a brother or sister with autism. And number one, kids are going to learn lessons at a very young age that they may not have been experienced to earlier. So today we talk about neurodiversity, we talk about inclusion and acceptance, and even as adults, we're being taught and experiencing the fact that everyone's different. This is something that kids learn from a very young age when they have a brother or sister with autism. And obviously I'm making generalizations, but I find that often siblings of a child with autism, they're kinder, they're compassionate people, they're just good people. They stand up for their brother and sister. They stand up what's right. They are not afraid to be different and to fight for what they believe in. And just overall, there's a lot of character building and lessons that come with raising a child with special needs, and parents, the same way a parent's character can become, you fight for your child, you do things you never thought you were capable of. Siblings also become people and do things that they never thought they were capable of. So there are a lot of benefits to being an autism sibling as well. And I don't want to just touch upon the negative in that. I want you to understand that there is good that can come from this, and that when you do help your son, daughter understand what their brother or sister is going through, and you help them and you teach them and you give them open communication, you give them the outlets that they need, they're going to benefit and be an amazing adults when they grow up. So, I really hope that this presentation was helpful for you. Again, my name is Jessica Likewise. I'm an ABA therapist with Path to Potential. We are currently accepting clients for ABA in Arizona, Florida, New York, and New Jersey. So if you're looking for ABA services, we would love to help you. We believe in a very inclusive model, so we help an entire family, including grandparents, extended family, brothers, sisters. We make sure that everyone's on the same page, parents, And, you know, we would love to help your family. So again, if you want to find out more information, head over to our website, path2potential.org, and we would love to help you get started. Again, my name is Jessica. Likewise, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about this presentation, and I'd be happy to help.